Hey YouTubers, welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm the Tailorette, and today I'm going to be talking about how I made my wedding dress. Now, when I made my wedding dress, I did not focus too much on doing instructionals. However, this is somewhat an instructional video, but I wanted to save most of my time of just enjoying making my wedding dress. So it is basically on mute, but I'll be doing a voiceover, but I have all the footage of how I made it, and so this is how it went. So I'm starting out with cutting out the dress. I won't go into detail about how I designed it because that was a long story. I may do another video on that later, but I actually designed this way ahead of time, long story short. And I used a silk for the outer layer, and so I had to actually stabilize it because it was very thin and it was a very flowy fabric. I was planning on using that for the skirt. So I actually took it to the table and I started to pin the two pieces together, just so I could actually baste them around the edges and they would become one fabric piece rather than one thin layer. Then I started basting them on the sewing machine. Once they were all basted, I put it on the mannequin to make sure that it fit correctly and that it was hanging right. So there were quite a few alterations that I had to make along the way, but I won't include that in this video here. So there I am. I'm sewing the princess seams in the front because it was a princess seam around the bust, and then I started to press them open, made sure that it was nice and flat on the outside there, and then I put it back on the mannequin, made sure it fit. There were a lot of lumps and bumps in the bust area, and along this whole project I had to make a lot of adjustments to the bust, but I did not put that in this video. So we'll just assume that all of those alterations were made, and I actually put the straps in between the lining and the outer layer, and here I'm actually sewing the side seams of the lining together because I wanted to try the straps first before I actually attached the whole bodice together. So I sewed the side seams and the straps, and yeah, the straps were a little bit too long, so I had to actually take those in, all those little alterations I made, and then I was feeling like, hey, I can actually start closing up this dress by the side seams. And there I'm pinning the neckline because I sewed them right sides together with the lining and the outer layer, just so it had a nice clean edge. And so I just did a 5/8 inch seam all the way around the edge, which turned out super great. And then once that was done, I was able to pull out some of the straps. Now I had to sew the front straps first, kind of hard to explain, but I had to sew the front straps in, close them in, and then pull them out so I could actually do the back strap so the strap wouldn't get caught in under the armpits in that seam there. So there I'm pulling out both sides. I have both straps sewn in, which turned out really great. I was actually really happy with how it looked. And there's another strap right there. And moving on to the next step, I actually did a stay stitch, or it was more like a top stitching on the inside. This is the lining. I'm doing a top stitch right up to the edge of the seam. This was literally to help prep for the actual seam, the pressing part of the seam, because the neckline needed to be a nice clean edge because the lining would be pressed to the inside of the bodice. So here I am actually getting ready to, actually you can see my stitching right there. That is the stitching on the lining on the inside of the seam. And then I put it on the ironing board. I kind of had to shift it around, but then you take the iron and you press it down, and because you have those stitches there, it makes it a really nice crispy edge and it doesn't look lumpy. Otherwise it would have been really hard to press it, and it would just be, I'd be constantly finagling with it, and then there would be a lot of puckering in the bodice. So that worked out well. I liked how it pressed, and then I took a scrap piece of fabric, and this is a trick that I like to use. This is a scrap piece of 100% cotton, and I jack my iron up on high and fill it up with with water, so I can actually steam the edges there. So you can see that all the edges are going to be nice and crisp, and it's not going to look like it's bubbling at the neckline, because that is one of my biggest pet peeves about homemade projects, is they're not pressed very well. I decided to throw it on the mannequin so I could actually press it to the form of the shape of the bodice rather than just on the iron. This helps actually set it in stone, at least that's what I found, and there it is. Nice and smooth. There are still little puckers in the bodice. I'm not super concerned because a lace is going to go over that, or a tulle material. So this is just the base of the bodice, and then there will be a bunch of other things that go on top of the dress as well, which brings me to my next step, is the tulle material. I wanted to have an overlay, and so I started draping it to the outside of the bodice, and then right after that I actually used my pressing technique on the mannequin on top of the tulle so that I could actually press the tulle so it doesn't look like I have a floating angelic look. So I didn't want to have that because that's not my style. Great for other people, just not for me. So I decided to add another layer of tulle on top of that just because I didn't want it to be completely sheer, so I was kind of playing around with it. And after I put that layer on, I did another layer of pressing on top of that, and then I decided to start working on the other side of the bodice in the front. So here is the first layer on the left side, and then I did the pressing again, and then I added another layer to match the other side, did a lot of draping on top of that, and there's the finished look of the front at least. Still kind of shaggy looking, but here I am pressing it again. I just gave it one more press over, and then I had to trim the shoulders because there was a bunch of excess fabric on top, and that will end up being sewn into a shoulder seam, but for now I'm working on draping it. And here I'm working on the back, put the first layer, and then I pressed it again, and then I put the second layer on just like I did in the front, and then I pressed it. After that, I didn't put that on here, but I also put the second layer on the other, or not the second layer, the first layer on the other side. And then once that was finished, I added another layer on top of that. Here I am adding the second layer. Kind of takes a lot of work to do all of this, but it was definitely worth it, or maybe not, I don't know, we'll see. And there we go. We have a bunch of excess fabric sticking out, and give it one more press. Pressing is hugely important, guys. So here I am trimming all the excess fabric off that I don't need and making it to shape with the bodice underneath. So that is how I at least do my draping. And then I took it to the mannequin, had a little excess fabric on the shoulders, still finishing that off. And once I had that trimmed off, I had to take it to the mannequin over here. And there's all that raw edge on the armpit there. I'm not sure if you can see that, but here I'm basically just turning it under. And then later on, I ended up stitching it down. But here I'm basically setting all the tulle in place. And this is so that it all stays. And then if I bend over in the dress, it doesn't shift. And then there's a hole. So I'm going to actually tack down all of those pleats and gathers there. So this next clip that I'm going to show you, this is where I'm basically stitching it down and just working on the armpits, and then I ended up tacking down a bunch of other spots. Okay, so this next part I am going to cut out the skirt pieces for my dress. I plan on having it more like an A-line on the first layer so that I can actually sew on the thicker layers of tulle underneath to give it a really big poof around the skirt, because I'm going for a more fuller look in the dress. And I'm overlooking my directions just to see what kind of style I want to do. And here I am actually sewing the pieces together, and I'm rolling the hem at the bottom so that it's just all nice and clean. And then I'm throwing it on the mannequin just to see how it looks. And yeah, this is actually a nice silk cotton material. And for this next part, I am measuring to see where the thicker tulle is going to land on the skirt. And here I'm cutting out the length, and I plan on gathering it really tight. And the basic idea is that I'm going to put all the tulle towards the lower half of the skirt so that it's poofy at the bottom but not around the waist. And here I'm doing the gathering stitches. I'm putting them together. I'm gathering all the stitches together so that it makes a really nice tight poofy look. And just testing it on the dress to see how it looks, to see if it's enough gathering. And I think at this point I wasn't quite sure if I had gathered it enough. So I took it off and I took it to the table, and now I'm gathering it some more. And I took it over to the mannequin to try it out again, and I put a piece of fabric over it just to test it out. And I decided that I didn't like it. Well, maybe I did. I just needed more. Well, I created a shorter one so that it would go lower to see what it would look like, because I think it felt a little bit too poofy at the top. So I started adding layers going from the bottom up and then testing it with the fabric on top. So after doing all of that work of adding that tulle to the top of the lining, the inner part, And seeing how it looked, I decided to actually make the overskirt piece to see how it looked with the actual shape. So here I'm creating a circle skirt. I cut out the fabric and I'm liking the shape that I created. So I decided to actually stitch it on the serger and then I can just throw it on the mannequin to see how it looks. And there I'm pleased with what I have. So I'm continuing to work on the tulle layer underneath, and so I put it on the mannequin. And then I tried it on and I was like, hey, I actually kind of like how this looks. However, I'd like a little bit more poof. I was thinking this is nice, but I'm going for more of a ball gown look. So here I'm adding more tulle underneath, and I used a lighter weight tulle so that it wouldn't be so stiff. It's kind of like an in-between. And so I kept adding layers starting from the bottom going up and trying to see what it would look like. So that way I didn't have to take stuff off. So here I am trying it on. I'm feeling pretty good about it. I like the shape of it, and here I'm actually stitching it on because I think I only pinned it. And then I was like, well, I could use another layer just to get a little bit more poof going on. So this took a lot of work. It was really stressful to work with it on the machine. It was just a lot of fabric to work with. So here I'm trying it on, and it looks a little thinner on the video, but in person it was actually a lot bigger, it felt like. And so then I decided to actually start working on the train. This is the skirt lining, and I put the tape measure and I'm trying to figure out where I want the train to go. I don't think I want it super long, but I think I'm gonna have it go here. So it's somewhat practical, long enough, I don't know. Back to the cutting board, and I'm ready to actually start adding my train to the end of the skirt. So I created another piece that was the same shape as the back piece that I had. However, I was adding extra fabric down at the bottom, but here I'm tracing out how long I want it and I'm cutting it out. And then you can see here, that is what the piece looks like in the back over there. The piece is longer. I don't know if you can tell, but I have footage that shows it a little bit better. And so I'm cutting out the front piece. I had to add a little bit to the side back of the front piece, just because I wanted it to blend with the train in the back. So here I'm pinning it and I'm cutting it on the fold. The fold is over by where the dress is in the back there. And so it's cut out. And this is just a practice run. Okay, so this is just a scrap piece of fabric that I got from somebody. It's like a super cheap material. But anyways, so this is the side seam of the skirt, and then this is the back of the train. So this is longer. It's kind of hard to see in this video, but this is shorter. So this is the side seam, and then it swoops to the back. I think it's about 12 inches longer over there. And then, yeah, so there's a front piece that I have to cut out as well to the front. So this is a really big skirt piece because this is cut on the fold, because this is the back, and then it's cut on the fold, so it'll open up and it'll be a big fan in the back of the skirt. So yeah, lots of fabric. Okay, so, and I take this was a scrap piece because I'm testing it out to make sure that I actually like the shape of it. The skirt looks a lot smaller in the video because this is actually a fisheye lens because my sewing room is small. But anyways, so yeah, I'm just basically, yeah. So this will be the train in the back. There's a lot of fabric here. Yeah, so it'll be like that. And then the side seam will meet over here. It'll kind of gradually go into the same length. I have a separate piece for the fronts of the skirt because obviously I don't want the train in the front too. Okay, so I'm super glad that I actually cut it out first because I don't like how much it's fanning out here. So I think I'm going to trim that up. I like the length in the back. It just looks like a circle. So I'm actually going to kind of work with this a little bit. So I literally just cut it off on the sides. I mean, hey, why not? So this one side, I'm doing on one side, and then I will fold it and mimic it on the other side. I didn't show that in the videos, but we'll just assume that I did it and the pattern piece is created the way I like it. So I trimmed it up, and if you look at this side versus this side, there's a bunch sticking out there, which that's totally fine. That works too. But I think I like how this tapers off a little bit better here, so it's not just one big half circle. It kind of goes with, like, if or when I'm walking down the aisle, it kind of goes with the flow of the direction I'm walking. And just like how I usually do things, I didn't like it still, so I kept cutting it, and I actually got it to the shape that I like. So this is what it looks like here. It's more towards the back. I wanted to have a distinction, to have the silhouette showing in the front. I didn't want the train to actually swallow the whole silhouette in the front, so I wanted the train in the back rather than starting more towards the front like most dresses do. And I realized that the bottom was a little uneven. I want it to be a nice clean cut all the way around the front so you can see the shape of the dress, and I really liked how it looked. The bottom layer obviously is sticking out, that needs to be fixed, but here's how it looks. I actually cut out the tulle. I didn't video that, but I have the layers put together of the tulle. And then I went ahead and added the bra cups in there because I did not want to wear a bra under my dress. It just made it look extra large in that area because it was white. So I just hand sewed those in between the lining and the outer layer of the dress, and you never knew that it was in there. And I just put on the dress on my wedding day, and that was all I had to do, and I didn't have to think about anything else. And I'm finishing up the stitching. I basically attached it to the seam there that's pressed open. And here we go. I'm measuring the bodice, so I make sure that actually matches the measurement of the skirt because I'm about ready to attach the skirt. Here I am pinning it to the bodice to the skirt. And then I will sew that together in this next clip. I am sewing it together, and then it's ready to be tried on here pretty soon. But before I have to do that, I press the waistline up, and I'm using that technique with the cotton so that it actually gets pressed really flat because I was afraid of it puffing up a little bit too much around the waist. It was already kind of puffing out anyway. So that, my friends, is the step of where I tried on the dress, and you're probably thinking it's almost done, the second part is coming and we're gonna see it all finished, but no. I actually took apart the whole dress, no joke. I was so upset with how it looked. I looked puffy. I think the big skirt with just my height made me look extra fat. I had other people telling me the same thing. So you will have to stick around for part 2 because I have footage on what I ended up doing with the dress after that. So stay tuned, hit that subscribe button, you don't want to miss it. And I will see you all next time. Adios, everyone.